Thank you, all of you moderators and organizers of this fantastic event. I did not stay up all night watching it, but I did. I was on for a little bit late yesterday afternoon, my time, and here on the East Coast in the U.S., and a little bit into the evening, and then have been back on this morning. So it's been a fantastic event. And so my topic that I want to talk about is really the link between odors and corrosion, and it's been mentioned several times. The very first presentation about 18 hours ago talked about the link between odors and corrosion, specifically in relation to hydrogen sulfide, and then Dick and Steve in the last two presentations have talked about this as well. So I'm just going to build on that, and the main message here is that particularly in wastewater systems and with hydrogen sulfide, there's a very strong link between odor and corrosion, and where we have odors and where we have odor complaints can be an indicator for corrosion and compromised conditions in our systems. So there we go. So as we look at condition assessment, there's this phrase, to get where we want to go, we must know where we are. And so we conduct physical condition assessments to predict remaining service life and asset management. But odors can indicate compromised asset conditions and can drive that condition assessment program and asset management. And so as you look at a typical asset management approach, there's a preliminary risk assessment, which may be based on age, risk of failure, impact of failure, and physical observations of conditions that would indicate a more detailed condition assessment would be appropriate for a particular asset. And so then you go into doing field data verifications and O&M planning. But one of the things you see here is that you get deeper into that, we start performing odor and H2S evaluations, and then identifying improvements based on the capacity of the condition. And one of the things that I believe is important is that instead of investigating odor and H2S as a result of a condition assessment, that odor and H2S can drive the priorities for that condition assessment. So this has been discussed in a few presentations already. I'll touch on it briefly again, is that H2S does, in addition to having the rotten egg odor that gives us our odor complaints, it does cause corrosion in our systems, and it's through the conversion of H2S to sulfuric acid, typically taking place in damp locations, moist locations where you have atmospheric H2S, atmospheric oxygen that both get dissolved into an aqueous phase where the thiobacillus bacteria can grow, thrive, can form the sulfuric acid and cause corrosion, particularly of metallic and concrete structures. So in our systems, odors are what get attention. People call and they complain about odors. They're adversely affected by odors, and it affects their quality of life. And they let us know. They let utility operators know when there's a problem. The pipes, the lift stations, the other assets don't pick up the phone and call in and say, "Hey, I'm corroding down here." But the folks who are calling and telling us that they're affected by odor can give us an idea of where to look and where to do more detailed condition assessment activities. So really, what we're talking about here is a holistic approach, whether the condition assessment reveals H2S corroded assets or whether odor control or odor issues indicate that we might have those corroded assets. They really overlap, and the H2S affects both the condition of the assets and the odors. So it's important to perform sulfide assessments, and this has been topic of many presentations in the last 18 hours here in this event. So, but really conducting those assessments to not only identify where there might be odor issues, but where the sulfide may be of corrosive levels as well. So that can be accomplished through modeling. Steve just mentioned the Watts model, using that to predict sulfide formation and transformations, and also ventilation. So those types of models can be used to predict sorry about that. It can be used to predict the sulfide conditions, but then we can also characterize those conditions through actual field analysis, whether that's through GRAB or continuous monitoring for atmospheric hydrogen sulfide, by looking at differential pressure to understand ventilation and air movements in sewers and other head spaces, or through liquid phase and sampling of dissolved sulfide to understand sulfide formation and movement through the sewer system. All this can inform an asset rehabilitation, replacement, or mitigation strategy. And there's a lot on the slide. I'm not going to go through every piece of the slide, but in the lower right, one of the things that is a result of these types of investigations and condition assessments is potentially doing H2S mitigation and mitigating those impacts in the system, not only to protect from odor, but to protect the systems from corrosion as well. So if we're going to look at doing sulfide mitigation, we have to understand what we can influence. And I like to think of this as a four-piece puzzle. Really, there are four things that impact the presence and the magnitude of a atmospheric hydrogen sulfide problem in our systems. And the first is dissolved sulfide. And if you don't have dissolved sulfide, the other three don't really matter because the sulfide is not there. But assuming that there is dissolved sulfide, then the pH of the wastewater, temperature, both of the wastewater and the surrounding environment, and the turbulence or agitation of the wastewater all come into play. And so we think about how can we influence those pieces of the puzzle. And so we can influence dissolved sulfide through system design and operation, through cleaning of sewers to reduce the amount of debris that is providing an environment for the growth of sulfate-reducing bacteria, and through chemical addition to address either sulfide formation or prevent sulfide formation, or oxidize or otherwise remove sulfide that's already existing. With pH, we can look at what some contributors to pH may be in our systems through industrial pretreatment, and then also use chemicals to adjust the pH as well. Ulrich talked about using mag hydroxide for pH adjustment in his talk 2 or 3 presenters ago. Looking at turbulence or agitation of the wastewater, we can impact turbulence both through design and operating strategy of systems to reduce impacts of drops, of sharp bends in flow, of other places where wastewater gets agitated and causes enhanced gas release from the water. And then lastly, temperature. We can't really do a lot about temperature in most cases, especially in terms of wastewater temperature. Perhaps if you have some industrial discharges that are excessively warm that enhance biological activity and enhance sulfide production, you can work with industries to maybe do some heat recovery, help them out with heat recovery, as well as lowering the temperature of wastewater. But the big thing there is just be seasonally aware of fluctuations in temperature and how they impact sulfide formation, and then that can inform your mitigation strategy. And lastly, ventilation kind of encompasses all four pieces of the puzzle. And you not only remove the H2S, but it's really key to make sure that you have a good strategy for makeup air so that you are lowering the H2S concentration as well. What we see a lot is the phone rings and there are odor complaints. So a utility will either try to button things up to hold the odor in, or put in some type of odor control device to filter whatever air gets emitted so that it doesn't cause an odor impact. And that's great from an odor standpoint, and it achieves that objective of responding to our constituents, our neighbors, and reducing the adverse effects on their quality of life from odor. But many times those strategies actually enhance the corrosion problem by causing H2S levels within the infrastructure to increase. And we actually not only don't help corrosion, but we make it worse. So as we look at these strategies, again, some of these strategies involve system design and operation. Some involve liquid phase technologies. Some involve vapor phase applications as well. So won't go into much detail on any of these, but just to hit a summary of some of the big topics here that are possible for addressing these issues. One is, to prevent sulfide formation, and to do that, one of the key things is to limit force mains when possible. I don't think we often put in pump stations and force mains just because it's just for fun and games. But there are times when, particularly with developer type projects, where it might be easier to put in a pressure main than to do a gravity main and the additional excavation and work that would be required to do that. But we need to look at the impacts of those force mains in terms of sulfide formation and impacts on downstream, both odors and corrosion. Minimizing detention time as much as possible, maximizing the opportunity for oxygen introduction to keep systems aerobic to prevent the septicity that leads to sulfide production, achieving scouring velocities in lines so that you keep lines as clean as possible and don't have debris accumulation that provides more environment for sulfate reducing bacteria growth, and also to consider sulfide in cleaning plants along the same lines to make sure that is an objective of cleaning plants, not only for hydraulic reasons, but for sulfide production to keep debris out of systems, and to control industrial discharges. Temperature, BOD, high sulfate, all things that can contribute to sulfide formation, and to make sure that those are being controlled to the greatest extent possible. Designing systems to minimize turbulence, as I mentioned before, to eliminate drop manholes, to use drop pipes, maybe vortex inserts, things to reduce the agitation of the water, to design our systems for air movement, to keep that air moving, get the sulfide out and the fresh air in, and lastly, to design systems for exposure to sulfuric acid, to use corrosion-resistant materials of construction to the greatest extent possible in the systems.
Vaughan, you have about a few more minutes, and there's one question.
Okay, great. I'll really quickly then, liquid phase treatment, a lot's already been talked about. I don't need to repeat it. Just site selection and dose rates are important. The dosing and storage equipment, of course, needs to be designed to accommodate liquid phase treatment. And then some of those treatment technologies are to use chemical oxidants, biological additives, iron salts, oxygenation, and to add oxygen, and adjustment of pH. And then vapor phase treatment. We've talked, other speakers have talked about this as well. Pulling negative, maintaining vacuum on head spaces, but combining that with a strategy to make sure that you're lowering the concentration in that head space. And so you're achieving not only odor control, but corrosion control as well, whether it's through biological, chemical, or absorptive type technologies. So one utility's end results, this is my last slide, just looking at a utility that I've worked with, that my firm has worked with. This particular utility had a years-long successful odor control strategy of controlling odor, but hadn't really addressed corrosion and started to observe some of the challenges that produced in terms of infrastructure failure. And they worked to shift their treatment strategy to encompass corrosion. And so they moved from, hey, just keep the phone from ringing, to try to keep, well, their goal is to keep all of their head spaces at less than 20 ppm average H2S. That involved doing some upstream chemical dosing, some turbulence reduction, and some vapor phase treatment, and some continuous H2S monitoring. They were able to reduce corrosion at some prime control points, and particularly in lift station wet wells and gravity lines. Also recognized enhanced odor control as well as safety benefits from doing that. And then they extended the asset life of some specific key points, a number of lift stations, more than 300 manholes, 3 headed works, that they documented that the expected life was extended life was over 15 years for those assets, and would save over $20 million, accounted for the cost of the odor and corrosion control program. So, in conclusion, just want to say, look beyond odor complaints, or look at those odor complaints as an opportunity to do some condition assessment, and then implement strategies to mitigate odors and corrosion. So my contact info is there, and we'll see if the fancy QR code works. You can shoot that and get my contact information.
Okay. Well, here's a question. In designing a biological system, what concentration peak to mean ratio can that biological system that you showed handle, and over what time period? So that biofilter you showed?
Yeah, so that might be, just looking at that question, that question might be more directed towards Louis' presentation, where he was talking about biological systems and biological system design. And so we may want to address that in the roundtable a little bit later. I'll go ahead and answer and say that for me, and for the way I like to design systems, I usually look at a peak to mean ratio of 4, peaking factor of 4. So, if you have an average H2S level of 50 ppm, I'm usually pretty comfortable with peaks up to about 200. But above that, I start to get a little, we want to look at other supplemental technologies to make sure that we can handle those peaks.
Is it also tied to the gas contact time in the biological media versus?
It's a bit tied to the contact time, but it's more tied to the mass of bacteria that you'll have in the system. The bacteria are going to acclimate to the conditions that they are exposed to, and the primary driving condition there is that average sulfide load, or average food source, if you will, for them, and so they're going to struggle. You're going to struggle to have enough biomass there to absorb higher levels.
And I guess pH also plays a role in it as well. Now you want to keep pH low at the front end of your biofilter for H2S control.
Yes, around 2.
Okay.
Yeah, right here, seeing a lot of mercaptans and other organic software coming through the collection system. In collection systems you looked at, where have you seen high mercaptan loading and manage that in gas phase systems? And mainly biological, or
yeah, it's mainly, we mainly address mercaptans with biological systems, non-recirculating biological systems, so you do get the pH gradient, or adsorptive type systems, whether it's activated carbon or some other adsorbent.
So kind of a polisher is what you're saying.
Right, or if it's a low H2S, primarily mercaptan application, you might just use an adsorptive system alone, as opposed to using it as a polisher for a biological system.
Okay, great.